Another week and another episode of ClubCast. This week we are talking about a bunch of stuff American League, a bunch of stuff National League, a couple things touching on my team, a couple things touching on your team, that being the Dodgers and the Phillies. But just getting straight into it. So the Orioles, have been taking a lot of steps forwards this year. Um, Last year they were on the cusp of getting into that last wild card. It didn't end up working out, but they saw a lot of steps taken in the right direction. We all know about the terrible years that they've had before after 2016, but up until now, it looks like they're poised for a lot of success. So, pretty much getting into it for the first topic, the Orioles right now have 95 wins. They are very close to overtaking the Atlanta Braves, who, if you asked a Braves fan, I would have thought they were on par with the Mariners in 2001 or the Dodgers last year for their regular season record. It's a lot closer than what a lot of people think now. Um, how confident are you about the Orioles as we get closer to October?
It's a weird middle ground because it's a team that was 22nd in postseason odds coming into the season. I mean, nobody saw this coming. Obviously, 95 wins, like you said, 95 plus wins. But I don't think many people really saw them, competing to this degree. They've had 88 consecutive series where they haven't been swept. They had two comeback games this week. They're playing well coming into October. I mean, it's another team that's inexperienced but has a lot of talent on it. I think. Obviously, that's where you have your doubts and you're in the inexperience. You have some guys there like John Means is back now for them. Kyle Gibson was in the postseason last year with the Phillies. And you have Jack Flaherty, who's been around for a minute, who hasn't been pitching well, but it's guys who can, hanker down and get you a win if you need to be. I think you have. It's a good vibe, obviously, with the Orioles and what they're doing and all the young guys. The inexperience scares me, but I think they have too much talent to really worry, especially now. Worry about basically anybody other than the top teams in the AL, like the Rays or the Astros or something like that.
So, like I said, they do have 95 wins. They're well on their way to winning over 100 games, which, like you said, at the beginning of the year, I'm surprised it was like that. I had to double check that when I was looking up stuff this past week, that they were actually like one of the lowest ranked American League teams to like with chances to make the playoffs when they won like 83 or 84 games last year, and they barely missed. Like they like a couple more wins that went their way, they would have been in that last wild card seat because they finished right behind, a couple games behind the Rays, who had 88 wins and just snuck in the playoffs last year. So I was very shocked to see that was kind of like an uphill battle for them. Not many people had faith in them. I mean, we and you even talked like when we did some of our preseason articles where I had a lot of faith in the Orioles. I thought they were going to take a step in the right direction. I didn't think they were going to be 100 win um, league leading team. So I'm pretty shocked about that. Before I give you my thoughts, if you were to pick the American League champion today, don't all things just point to the Orioles being the favorite? Because we've seen the Astros playing pretty terrible the past couple weeks. The Rangers have been on a spiral like no other team has seen due to their issues with pitching. The Mariners have been hot, but then the past week, they've lost 11 of their last 18 games. I don't think there's really a clear American League favorite, and I feel like the Orioles are just playing good enough baseball right now that I feel like I'm getting closer to picking them as like the team that's going to represent the American League.
I think I'm gonna I think I'm gonna go with what you always say is you can't count out the Astros. Like it's a team that always is there and always wins. But 100%. I mean, none of these teams are playing well. This isn't the old Astros team that we really know. It's a lot of holes, a lot of not as deep things like that, not as much pitching, but it's it. I don't think you can count out. I think it's like past the crown. You know what I mean? You can't say the Astros. You can't not pick the Astros. I think, but I was trying to. I think the only team that the Orioles can really be afraid of in that first round would be the Blue Jays or somebody like that. Any wild card teams. I don't think any of the other teams have enough skill. Like I said before, the experience matters, but they're talented, man. They got a lot of good hitters and they have pitching. It just depends on if they can stay good enough. Like you said, they're playing well enough, not playing great, but not playing bad. So if they can even keep that up, I think they have really one team to beat in that AL.
Yeah, so my biggest thing when I look at teams as we get closer to the stretches, I kind of look at what have they done since the All-Star break, because everything that happens before that, that's 50-50. Like the good teams hunker down and get their stuff together for that stretch. And since the All-Star break, they're one of the best teams in baseball. They have 41 wins and 21 losses. They skyrocketed over the Rays in the division. It's gotten a lot closer now, but since the Orioles kind of held them off this past week, they've kind of maintained that 3-game lead if they win today. So once you're about like a week and a half, 2 weeks left, that's kind of a big lead, So, and I don't think they play each other for the rest of the year. And the Orioles won I guess the tiebreaker scenario if they did get tied. But just everything about this team it's surprising because there's so many young players on this team. So we don't know what we were going to get. Yes, they were highly touted prospects, but we don't know how they were going to translate into the majors. And for Orioles fans, good for them. All these prospects, for the most part, seem to have panned out, And I look at 2 or 3 guys for the reason why the Orioles are as successful as they are. So obviously, right off the bat, Adley Rutschman, ever since he came up last year, it seems like it was an entire shift in direction for the Orioles. It's extremely rare to get good offensive numbers, defensive numbers from a catcher who is pretty much like a 5-tool player. Like he's pretty fast for catchers too. Has good bat to ball skills and is good on defense. And we've seen him kind of to make sure that there's no like tired. Like they've been DHing him a lot, which you kind of see with a lot of good hitting catchers in the league. So because playing catcher, that can be hard, But he's got a sub 300 batting average. It's a little bit down from last year's seasons, but it's kind of leveling out. He's a guy that's going to hit around 20 home runs. He's got 3.6 WAR this year, which is around what he had last year when he was only up for about like half the year. But the big guy, is a dude that's pretty much run away with the Rookie of the Year award, and that's Gunnar Henderson. So much and so that Vegas actually took the odds off their score books recently because Corbin Carroll and Henderson had such like negative spread for that. So they took it off because those guys looks like they're probably going to win each of their awards unanimously. But Henderson, man, he struggled in his first probably week or two in the bigs, and now he has what we got here 27 home runs, which I didn't even realize. That's a lot of home runs.
Yep.
He's got a WAR over 6. He plays very good shortstop, and he's just one of those guys that puts a spark in your lineup, whether it's his defense, the hair, the bat, everything about him just screams franchise player. And he may not even be the best shortstop in the Orioles system. So, because the kid Jackson Holiday is on his way to making the majors in the next year or two. So it'll be interesting to see with that. And another guy, he hasn't really gotten off to a good start this year compared to last year and the year before. It's Cedric Mullins, man. But since the All-Star break and since he's finally been healthy, he's hitting around 250, has a lot of pop. We've seen it this past week against the Astros and the Rays. He had the walk-off sac fly, he had the game-tying double, he had the game winning home run against the Astros, I believe, yesterday or the night before. So if this guy can get going, this is a guy that was part of some of those bad Orioles teams that was the one bright spot. Now you put him in the midst of a playoff contender. Um, they look good to go. My biggest concern, though, is just the pitching. And they've been getting by. They have a team I think it was 4.03 when I looked ERA since the All-Star break, which is one of the best. But if you look at their starters, I mean, you wouldn't think that because one of their best starters for the entire year has been Kyle Gibson, and he's been starting to struggle as of late. You mentioned they traded for Jack Flaherty, who me and you both thought was going to be, that's their ace, and now he's being moved to the bullpen as a lengthy reliever option. The biggest X factor, John Means got activated last week, and he's finally pitching games. He's obviously not going to be going deep, so maybe you see they take a note out of the Dodgers playbook and start doing piggyback starts. Maybe start Means, get him 3 innings, bring in Flaherty. I mean, seeing Means and then coming in with Flaherty, who's throwing 100 miles per hour, is something that isn't the best thing as a batter. So I feel like if they can put it together enough, when I look at the American League, there just really isn't a clear favorite. And the Orioles, they are inexperienced, but it's just, I feel like I'm just riding the wave, Like last year, no one picked the Phillies to win it or anything. They just got hot at the right time. It seems like the Orioles are playing really good baseball right now, and they're putting it together. Um, So, we'll have to see what happens. It'll be something to look forward down in Baltimore. So, I would love to see them upset these bigger teams like the Astros and stuff like that. So, get some new blood in there. But these young guys are going to be hungry come playoff time.
Uh, it's kind of like the Phillies last year with in terms of the vibe and the pop in the lineup and all that. But like you said, the problem is that their top end pitching just isn't there. They don't have a guy that can go out and win you a game really, which sucks because that's what you need, especially against these wild card teams that are just throwing anything they can at you. Um, I like that you talked about Cedric Mullins because Cedric Mullins was so fun to watch. I think it was 2021 or something like that when he started popping off. It was hitting 300 with all that, like you said, with that ton of pop. It's nice to see him back hitting again for a good Orioles team for once. And then of course the fucking Baltimore mold, apparently the white guy with the long brown hair that can hit really good. It's fun to watch. Gunnar Henderson, Rutschman, and even like you said, Jackson Holiday. Those two guys really are carrying this team. I mean, the other guys are adding on and stuff like that, but it's like that's their blood. It's their guys now. When you walk in the Orioles Stadium and into the shop, you see Rutschman, and then you see Gunnar Henderson. Those are the guys you see. So I think we'll have to see. It'll be fun. I think we're all going to root for them against these other teams. Might have to get over there for one of these games if it fits, man.
Yeah, there are a couple X factors that I don't really want to take up too much time on because we'll probably definitely touch on them once we get to the playoffs. But honestly, their biggest X factor is Grayson Rodriguez because after his first 3 or 4 starts, he got teed off, got sent back to the minors, made some adjustments, and has a sub-3 ERA and is pretty much their guy. This rotation, this pitching staff, it's a cohesive unit. I mean, everybody's pitching any single time. So it's kind of the Rays method of methodology with pitching. So it can get them far. I mean, we've seen the Rays get really close, ALCS, World Series. So definitely Baltimore is going to be in there. Speaking of another team that's kind of switching things up in their rotation, your Philadelphia Phillies made a move, kicking out Michael Lorenzen of the starting rotation and moving him to the bullpen. We saw briefly in his first outing, did not go well at all. Couldn't get more than one out. Got pulled, had some command issues, walked 3 batters, gave up a couple hits, gave up a lot of runs in a blowout. It was against the Braves, I believe. So not a good start, not a good look for Lorenzen and the plan for putting him in the bullpen. Since his no-hitter, I'm not saying it could attribute to it. He threw the most pitches I don't even want to know what the mental and physical toll of that outing could have had. I do know there was a lot of Twitter warriors that are starting to say maybe this is something that is lingering due to the fatigue maybe from that outing, because since that outing, he has been pretty bad for the Phillies. And even collectively, since he got put on the red pinstripes, he has a 4-2 record. So they're winning ball games that he's pitching. It's just that his ERA is over 6, and that can't be something that you have in the playoffs, whether you're in the rotation or in the bullpen. So I'm kind of interested to see what your take. Do you think Lorenzen changes anything, or is there a possibility that he's not even on the Phillies postseason roster?
I'm hoping that's not the case. I know last year when they went into the postseason, the back end of the rotation kind of just wasn't there. Noah started one game in against the Braves, and then Kyle Gibson I think came in for a game or two when we were in a blowout. But yeah, man, it's since a no hitter. I don't like the concept of he threw 124 pitches. Oh, this is why, or the concept of this is gonna mess with him. I think the biggest thing, like you said, it's more the mental. I think when you go from that height of having a no hitter, nobody can touch it. Now, okay, let me try to place this ball there. I can do this. Let me put this on the corner there. I think he's trying to be too perfect, which is why last night when he piggybacked off Chris Sanchez, I think his command was off because he's trying to find his like perfection again. He's trying to find perfection instead of just trying to get the outs like he was in his first two outings when he came over. We're winning games, first off, which is all that matters. But two, we weren't expecting him to come over here and be another Zach Wheeler. I think people are overestimating him. I know I wrote that article. It literally said probably an overreaction. This guy was supposed to come over, give you 6 innings, give up 4 runs, maybe 5 runs, and let us hit 4 homers and win a ball game every 5th day. I don't think there'll be any problem. I mean, that's a guy you want coming out of the bullpen in the postseason. It's like Ranger Suarez last year came in. He's got ice in his veins. He's electric. It's fun to watch. I mean, could you imagine just this fucking jack dude in Vans cleats coming out and when the lights are flashing and shit? They're coming out. He touched 97 today or yesterday on his fastball, which while his command was off, that's another good thing. I don't think it's a fatigue thing. I think he's just trying to be too perfect, and his relationship with Caleb Cotham will be good because they were good in they were good friends in Cincinnati. So I think that they'll get him back on track for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern is that it's kind of what most playoff teams are at right now, where you're going to make it. So you just want to make sure you're there healthy. And I think a lot of the things that specifically with Lorenzen is baseball is so much mental, where the amount of bad outings like continue to pile up, especially when we get to the September stretch going into October. You don't want those to keep happening, because I know the Phillies are trying to experiment with putting him in the bullpen, like getting that ready. But I feel like it would probably be in their best interest, like say, hey, maybe give this guy like an extended period off, like 5 days without an appearance. You can't really IL him just because of where we're at in the season. And then bring him in out of the pen, either piggybacking off of someone, give him like 1 or 2 innings, see if he goes off of that, and then call it a day. Because at the end of the day, you want him to be healthy, but at least give him at least one outing where he can take some positives out of it. Because if he goes in, they try to keep pitching him multiple times from the bullpen, and it's just not working out. When October rolls around and you guys are going to be playing that first week, like 2 days after the season's over, he's still going to have that in the back of his head. Like, all right, I've been giving up runs to these guys, giving up runs to those guys. It seems like any adjustments I'm making aren't working. I think the Phillies should just give him a little bit of a break to work on things behind the scenes, have him throw some sessions like to before BP and stuff. I just go from like what the Dodgers do, and I've seen what other teams do, is that's usually what they'll do. They'll just, instead of putting him on the IL, they'll kind of just hide him and they won't go to him for a while. And especially we've seen that with a couple pitchers as we get closer to October, because I mean, you like I said, it's mental. You want to make sure he's in the right mindset when you get to October. So, what is the Phillies' current rotation right now? Because I know there was that one guy. Uh, is it Sanchez? Isn't he the rookie? Is he just part of that rotation now? Is he the fifth starter?
Yeah. So what the plan was for the end of the year was going to be, of course, Wheeler, Nola, Ranger, Taiwan Walker, and then the fifth day was going to be a piggyback. It's going to be Chris Sanchez with Lorenzen behind him. That was what the plan is. I mean, we're going to see what happens after what they said, what happened yesterday with Lorenzen. I like what you said. I think it would be good for him to maybe skip a game, skip a start or something like that. It's just tough when you're piggybacking somebody like that because that's 10 days now because you're still ramping him up as a starter. It's just not starting. He's doing it an hour later. An hour and a half later, he's starting his routine. Uh, yeah, it's come playoff time. It'll be Wheeler, Nola, Ranger, 100%. I honestly, at this point, I might have to start Chris Sanchez on that fourth game. He's been so good. I don't have his stats written down because I didn't think we were going to be able to talk about how good Chris Sanchez has been. But he's got like a two
Yeah,
something
he's
ERA
one of the
in
better.
it
Yeah,
in a half year. He's been good over I think scattered 3 years now for the Phillies. He comes in. He's a lefty with a good sinker and a good changeup. So that plays basically anywhere. Usually he's been that guy. Like we thought Lorenzen was going to be, the 4 or 5 inning guy, give you a 2-3 run, stuff like that. But this year he's been going 6-7 innings. I mean, 2-3 runs. He's kind of following that same path. He's almost the same pitcher as Ranger's been, out of the bullpen, out of the rotation. Yeah, I honestly would trust him with the fourth game of the playoffs.
yeah. I think it's hard. It's harder for like I'm starting to piece it together because right off the bat, I know the Dodgers are going to be in the NLDS. For the Phillies and any other wild card team, the way we saw it last year, the way you put your
Right.
team together for that wild card round is different. Some teams go pitching heavy. Some teams go. When it was the one game
Yeah.
playoff, everyone went pitching heavy because they wanted to make sure they had pitchers. Maybe 2 or 3 guys on your bench max for hitters because it's one game. For a series, you kind of can play around with it a little bit. And I think there really is a possibility that he's not on that roster. And maybe they substitute him probably with another bat from their bench to play matchups because, like you said, it's a 3-game series. Those 3 starters you just named, those are the ones that are going. And then at most, maybe Sanchez becomes that guy that could come out of the bullpen if needed. Lorenzen's role probably isn't really useful in the wild card round. So if I had to go back off like my question, if there's a round that he's not making, it's probably that one just because of the games at hand, 3-game series. Once you get to 5 games and 7 games, Lorenzen becomes useful again because you're more than likely going to be needing him to pitch innings for you. Not so much the NLDS, but if they get to the NLCS again, Lorenzen's role, like as a 4th or 5th starter, is going to be needed. But in the wild card round, you won't. But it really just depends on how he does these next 2 weeks, probably because they could get away with not having Lorenzen on the playoff roster for the first round at least.
Yeah, it's probably the same scenario as last year. Hopefully, we're at home. Hopefully, we get Wheeler, Nola 1-2, and we're done there.
Yeah,
Ranger starts game 1. Then you have Wheeler. Hopefully, I have enough time. Yeah, I mean, if you win game 1 and 2, you would have to go to Ranger in game 3. I think you're right. I think honest, I don't know because I think Chris Sanchez misses out before Lorenzen. I think just because of that flexibility. When you get to game 3 of the wild card, it doesn't matter. Like you're going to pitch whoever you want to pitch. But say Ranger has to go game 3, I think Chris Sanchez might go game 1. Honestly, I don't think Lorenzen would be it. I think
I
I think
really think it just depends on who you're playing. Because if you're playing the Cubs, if there's a lefty that I want
yeah,
in the bullpen, it would be Sanchez to face like the lefty bats like of Cody Bellinger and all them
yeah,
that are on that team. So it really just depends on
matchups.
it. It literally just depends on who they're playing that day. that series, and that's going to decide the roster.
But it's fun.
I'm like 90% sure Lorenzen is going to be on the entire postseason roster
Yeah.
from all the way through. It'll probably be other bullpen guys or guys on the bench that are kind of being shifted around.
Right.
So, but the Phillies have a lot of good questions to ask themselves, not bad ones. Like it's always good to have those open discussions to see, all right, that just means your team has a lot of talent and you have a lot to talk about with that.
Right.
So I'm wishing Lorenzen the best, Diamond Club boy.
We all
So we definitely need him to go lights out in the postseason. So, because, like you said, he had a really good start against the Nationals where he threw the no-hitter. And then the last couple starts, I've seen a lot of Phillies fans turn on him. It just takes one October run for everyone to forget about it. So definitely be on the lookout for Lorenzen these next couple of weeks as the Phillies, like other playoff teams, toy around with their rosters to see what they want. So, but we're getting really close to October. That's the good thing. Staying semi-wild card, the Padres technically are still in it. They're around 6 games back with around, I think, 12 or 14 games left to play. But, I've known for a while, and you've known as well, that their season is pretty much over. And a lot of stuff has come out recently that I'm not going to go too in depth with because I only read bits and pieces and I kind of knew everything to begin with. Now it's just starting to come out national media. Is Padres got a lot of problems going on, whether it be in the front office, the manager, and the clubhouse. So I'm interested to see, have you heard anything about, have you seen the Manny Machado stuff, like the articles that have been written?
Yeah. It seems like there's some hot waters over there.
I would say the biggest thing is I could have told you this to begin with, and Dodger fans could have told you this to begin with because we've seen, I love Manny Machado, awesome player, but is he a leader? I don't really get that qualities from him. I know he's a veteran now, but is he a leader? Just because you have the experience in the game doesn't make you a leader.
Right.
Obviously, we're not in the clubhouse to 100% confirm those stories.
Not
The only
yet.
ones that can confirm those stories are the players themselves that went unanimous in these discussions. So, but when I look at the Padres, man, there's a lot of disappointing things to pick out about this season. I mean, they're similar to the Mets, man. Like they had a very high payroll, one of the highest in the league. They had a bigger payroll than the Dodgers this year, and they're going to end up finishing behind not only the Diamondbacks, not only the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks, and the Giants. Which, if you told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have said, I don't really see that. Like, I was even if 50-50 on if the Dodgers were going to win the division because I thought the Padres were going to really take a lot of momentum from that series win last year to this year and maybe dethrone the Dodgers. We've seen the Dodgers lose the division once these past 3 years when they lost to the Giants. But the Padres, it seems like they never put it together and I think the biggest issue is the team leadership because I don't see a single guy on that team that's a team leader. Then the one guy that was a team leader, they traded away, and he wasn't the best baseball player, and that's Eric Hosmer, a dude that was beloved by everybody in the clubhouse, who, if I thought of a leader, I mean, from his time in Kansas City to when he was on the Padres, even during his struggles, he was still on the field helping out that young roster. But when I look at Tatis, not a leader. When I look at Machado, not a leader. When I look at Juan Soto, he's a really good baseball player. He's definitely not a leader, and he has a lot more other things on his mind than the Padres, what it sounds like, especially with his free agency coming up in a year. So how big of a disappointment are the Padres this year, and how worried should we be about them for not only the remainder of this year, but next year as well?
I don't think there's as big a disappointment as people are really saying. They're bad. They're not as good as they should have been, but like you touched on, I don't think any of us really thought they were going to, beat the Dodgers and win 100 games and all this
National
shit.
media did.
Right.
I tweeted out all those photos. Everybody was getting their freezing cold takes for the W that last week because they were retweeting everything after the Dodgers won the division, which so many people picked the Padres,
Yeah.
and I don't know.
I mean, it made sense, I guess, once you got Tatis back and all these guys. But like you said, it's like I don't like talking shit, but it's like a bunch of kids, man. It's like a bunch of kids running around out there. Like you have these guys who act like immature, even the veterans, like you said. You have fucking Trent Grisham out here trying to fight fans and shit. Then you have, the coaching staff who, I mean, isn't really the best coaching staff, doesn't really know what they're doing. The front office, like you said, all the stories and rumors does not sound good. Um, so I mean, really, the culture needs to check before anything. Uh, Obviously, next year they have a lot of roster turnover. You have Snell and Hader this year. Like you said, Soto, you have to figure him out. Um, your core is aging. Manny Machado's not getting any younger. I don't like to say it because Harper's the same age, but they're not getting any younger. You Darvish, you paid him this big money. He's getting older. Then you have veterans. They always have their veterans. Like I know Matt Carpenter wasn't that good this year, but Matt Carpenter, Nelson Cruz, Rich Hill, they traded for. There's a lot of unknown for them, I think. But even with the rumors and the bad stuff that's going on in the front office, when you have AJ Preller and Seidler and those guys there, I think they're always going to go for it. They're always going to try to compete. It's just like you said. What does Soto do? Does Manny start acting like a baby again? I mean, I just don't know what would happen if they continued the losing culture because none of those guys are going to like it.
Yeah. Like we knew that, like, I thought they were at least going to make the playoffs again.
Yeah, I agree.
That was the bare minimum. And the fact that they couldn't do that just makes it a disappointing season. If you're a Padres fan, super disappointing. You get to the NLCS last year, you get a taste of like getting so close to the World Series, beating the Dodgers finally, and then you go out in the next offseason and continue to spend money, more than the Dodgers, more than the Yankees and all these other teams. They get Xander Bogaerts. They got a shortstop. A lot of people questioning that move, and it's kind of looking like the people that question it were right because, they had Tatis at shortstop, who, I mean, wasn't the best defensive shortstop, but, I mean, that was your core guy. And then they were really trying to throw a lot of money at Trey Turner just to get him to go over there. So a lot of people have just been questioning their plan for roster construction. It just seems like AJ Preller and company just throw money at anything that moves. Like I feel like the owner and all of them, they're making these moves just to one up the bigger market teams like the Dodgers, just to say, hey, look, LA couldn't sign this guy, but we did. And then they're on the hook for that contract for a long time. Like the fact that Xander Bogaerts got the deal that he did, nobody saw that coming because he got way more money than he thought anybody thought he was going to get. So,
His mom thought.
Everyone was tweeting on it on Twitter after Chaim Bloom was fired. How is he fired before AJ Preller? Because AJ Preller, besides a postseason berth in the shortened 2020 year, and then barely making it into the playoffs last year with the roster that they had, and then they still didn't win the division. No division titles, two postseason appearances, and I think he's been there for 8 or 9 years, almost 10, yeah, because I think it was 2014 when he was hired, and he's done nothing to really show for it. I mean, and then their once great farm system has been depleted. It's on the rise again. I think the mid-season ranks from MLB.com had him at 9 or 10, still below the Dodgers and a couple other teams in the National League. When it comes to 2024, like you said, they got a lot of roster turnover. Juan Soto's about to be a free agent. Their leader in saves is about to be free agent. Blake Snell, the maybe probable Cy Young winner, is going to be a free agent. Manny Machado has an elbow issue that he's supposed to get surgery on. And then Yu Darvish, you also mentioned too. He's out for the season with some type of forearm tightness. And what have we been talking about these past couple episodes? It always starts out as forearm tightness and ends up being some type of UCL damage. Yep. And if at this point in his career, not many people come back from that. Like Justin Verlander is like the only guy I can think of. You Darvish, I don't know. It really just depends. So, and then there's rumors that they may be all in on the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes, which
Of course.
I feel like they would be the guys to give him a long-term deal more than anybody. So it's if I was a Padres fan, I'd be very concerned, and I really think Preller's brought in a lot of great baseball talent, but I just don't think just because you have the talent doesn't mean you're the best. Because when you look at on paper, this roster is the best roster, and probably you could argue in the National League, like on paper. Yeah, it's definitely the best roster name wise in the National League West, which is saying something because there's more star power on that team than the Dodgers. And I would agree with that. But the Dodgers just go about their business a different way than the Padres. And I think the biggest thing I'll touch back on going full circle is the Dodgers have so many team leaders where they put the team before me, and that just pretty much separates both clubs in my mind. So until they fix that, that's a whole cultural thing, whether it's in the clubhouse or the front office and even the ownership. So until they fix that, they're never really going to be that type of team everyone wants them to be, because they could be that team that challenges the Dodgers year in and year out, but I just don't see it with the group in charge right now.
I think the group in charge is what it kind of probably unintentionally created that culture with their roster construction. I mean, if I'm a player on that team like Tatis, like Cronenworth, who I'm pretty sure originally was a shortstop, and now he's a first baseman. Like he's moved everywhere.
Dude has played like 4 positions.
Yeah,
And
bro. Like, and then you have Kim, another guy who's been really good, and he's not
he's a
even
free agent.
another free agent, but not even playing all the time, playing different positions. It's like if I'm a player, I'm thinking, hey, it's like we're just out there, like fuck it, we're just trying to win. I'm just gonna, do whatever I want. And I think that's why you see that culture out there from those guys. Which I mean, not necessarily a bad thing, but it is when you're not winning. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I definitely think some things need to change if they want to bring that winning back. But I don't know. I just feel like there's other teams in the National League West in general that are just on the rise. Like the Diamondbacks, they got a lot of their guys that are on rookie deals. They just extended Corbin Carroll. The Giants, they have one of the best GM minds in Farhan Zaidi, who used to run the Dodgers a couple years ago. Their only bright side is that they're in the same division as the Rockies, so they most likely won't finish last place for a while. So
that's what the
when
Mets do.
Yeah. When it comes to 2024, I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot because do they bring back Blake Snell? Do they run it back? Do they just bring this roster back and say, you know what, let's roll the dice again and say, look what happens? But you never know. But staying in the National League West, we'll touch on it a little bit. The Dodgers won their division for the, I believe, what was it? I think the 11th time? The 10th time in 11 years. They've made the playoffs 11 straight years, which is third most of all time in a row. They're getting very close to the Braves record of 14 playoff appearances, division title winners too, during their 90s run from 1991 to 2005. A lot of comparisons to make between these two clubs from the past and even now. But are the Dodgers very similar to the 90s Braves?
It was actually kind of scary looking at it earlier while taking my notes and everything. When you look back on it, I mean, even kind of down to roster construction is pretty similar. Like you touched on, perennial championship contenders every year. The Braves had a little bit more deeper success. They went to 5 World Series. 8 out of 10 years in the 90s, they were in the NLCS, kind of like an Astros run, but a little obviously longer. But the Dodgers every year, I mean, division champions. The year they didn't win the division, they won 103 games or something that year.
Yeah, 106.
106, yeah, and then Darren Murphy didn't check swing on the last pitch, but we'll ignore that. But yeah, it's like you had that top end pitching with Smoltz and Glavine and Maddox, and then you had like Kershaw and every other pitcher that came in. I mean, you had Greinke for a little bit. You have all these guys that were so good. Then you have Chipper Jones. I mean, that's like your Justin Turner's, your. I mean, now your Mookie Betts is. You're definitely gonna touch this more, but it's just kind of crazy how interlocked these teams were. It's crazy that you're still able to play that well, and only win like one championship. It's like that's baseball, man. That's why it's so gorgeous.
Yeah. You know, I've touched on it a lot, especially when LA fell just short of multiple World Series titles before, there's a lot to judge more than winning a championship.
Mm-hmm.
While we do know the saying of this show is flags fly forever, there's a lot more that these teams have to judge in terms of was the season a success. Right. For teams like the Dodgers, since 2013, since they changed ownership group, their end goal every single year is to win a World Series. And a couple of years they fell short, couple first round exits. That's the one thing that I noticed right off the bat where they weren't similar is that, like how you mentioned, the Astros have been to so many American League Championship Series. The Braves were pretty much in every single NLCS from the 90s to the early 2000s. The Dodgers, I think, have been in, 7 or 8 of them over this run, subtracting a couple early round exits in 2019 last year, kind of the early run in 14 and 15. But for the Dodgers, it's kind of like a tale of two halves because, like you mentioned the players of old, like Justin Turner, like Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, those guys. It seems like the Dodgers had a mini run with those guys, and now they're building with another core of young guys. And I mentioned earlier the Padres farm system rank is 9 for MLB.com. For the Dodgers, I think it was 4. And we've already seen it this year with the amount of rookies that they've been able to call upon to give them big league innings, big league at bats, and it's only going to continue getting better and better. And that just goes to what the player development, the coaching, and the management in the front office. It's all a collective unit that puts good teams together year in and year out. And I've seen it firsthand. I mean, the Dodgers guys that I write with and do like their podcast with, we see that some of these fans are pretty spoiled because at the end of the day, stuff like this doesn't happen that much. And it definitely doesn't happen in baseball. I was reading some more stuff. If the Dodgers, they're on pace to win 100 games again in their quote unquote reset year. If they do, they would be the first team in baseball history to have 4 straight 100 win seasons, which I didn't even think about. And that's not even counting 2020, which I think their winning percentage that year, they had 45 wins in 60 games. So it was crazy. So that's well on pace to 100. So you're talking about perhaps like you could look at it 5 straight, over 600% percentage in winning. So Dave Roberts has been one of the winningest managers since he's taken over. But the Braves, what do they remember by in that run? They only got 1 championship, and I kind of feel like the Dodgers are on that end of the stick right now too, because their 1 championship, not only was it just one in that run right now, it was also in the COVID year, so they kind of have that on their back too. So it's definitely going to be record breaking for this Dodgers unit because I don't see them missing the playoffs. Not even just trying to be biased, but just the way the division looks and the way that they've continued to develop players, it seems like this run I don't even know if it's ever going to end anytime soon. Like you're looking at maybe like 4 or 5 straight years still from this core unit of rookies. And then when they develop and draft more, if they continue doing what they're doing, I mean, not even division titles, at least postseason bursts, they would definitely, I see them in that picture for another probably 4 or 5 years, unless anything drastic happens. So that alone would just, I think it would break the MLB record for most playoff appearances in a row, which I forget what the team was. I think it was like the Yankees or something. But yeah, it is crazy. You could also put some sentiment. These two teams are kind of interlocked now because, the Dodgers are on their run. And the Braves are on their run now too because they've won 6 straight NL East titles. This core is locked up for a long time, and they only have one World Series to show for it right now. And we've already touched on how the National League kind of is top heavy with a lot of these guys. Only one person can represent the National League, and as we start to get closer to October, man, these two teams, everyone thought the Braves were on this higher pedestal, but I think we're starting to see that they're kind of vulnerable, and you can attest to that. I mean, the Phillies took 2 out of 3, right? And then
Took
the
4 out
Marlins,
of 3 for the last 7 games.
yeah, and then the Marlins swept them. So you never know. Like come October, but if these two teams, you may see the Braves get eliminated first round again. You never know what's going to happen. Um, so it's kind of crazy that these two teams I wrote about before. They're like interlinked. There's so many guys that have gone both paths and that both are kind of on like the same run. So it's going to be interesting this October because I touched on it last episode. I know both these teams and the players on their teams definitely don't want to get kicked out in the first round again like last year. That had to have been demoralizing and embarrassing. It was embarrassing as a fan. I know it's probably even worse as a player. So we'll see what happens come October. So
Yeah, I've been trying to enjoy it. I mean, it's you don't think about these runs that the teams are going on until after it's gone. But like you said, man, when you look at the Braves, what do you think of? Smoltz, Glavine, Maddox, Chipper. You look at the Dodgers, you think of Seager, Bellinger, Kershaw, guys like that. When you look at what do you think of when you look at those '90s, 2000 Yankees? You think of they won 4 straight championships. That's what you think of. You don't think of Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez. No, you're thinking of they won 4 rings in a row. And I think that's what really one of these teams, hopefully not the Braves, needs to do to make their sediment like these guys were good, like the '90s Braves, like the Murderers Row Yankees, like teams like that. It's got to be a run. I mean, like you said, both teams are set up. The Braves are locked up for a minute. Dodgers, perennial fucking gods of developing any player you can think of. So I mean, they're not going to slow down anytime soon. It's fun to watch, man. It's fun to watch rivals, but it's also fun to watch those guys come in, you know, out of nowhere and slay them. So you have to have your beast to have your, you have to have your Goliath to have your Davids. So
yeah,
it's fun to watch.
exactly. Definitely well put. So staying kind of out west, another Shohei Ohtani news.
I
We'll
think
keep
we've had
it
one
brief with
every
this
episode.
one. He's so interesting, and there's always new stuff that's happening with Ohtani because last week, obviously he was shut down. Then apparently he cleared out his locker, took everything, went to Japan, then came back because they knew that his PR team knew that was probably a bad look. And then he was back first pitch, like 6 hours before first pitch. So dude probably didn't sleep at all because I'm pretty sure the flight from LA to Japan is like 10 hours. So yeah, that was interesting. But the biggest thing is that Ohtani, when he went over to Japan, he did have his surgery, some type of procedure on his UCL. They're being extremely vague about it, but what they did say is that he will not pitch next year unless all boxes are checked before like the year is over and he can actually start getting into games. They did say he'll DH, and a lot of teams. I even saw a couple Dodger beat reporters saying, they're still going to be interested in him. Two questions to this. He's going to miss pretty much like almost a month of the season. Obviously, we know he's the MVP, but should there kind of be some consideration for other guys because of the amount of time he's missing? And then once he is a free agent and now he did have a surgery on his UCL, are you still willing to give him that big deal, or are you on Stephen A. Smith's side with this one? Because I don't know, man. So
You don't fill the seats, man. Don't you know that? Nobody goes to baseball games to watch Shohei Ohtani. I think that was the funniest thing I heard all day. We'll start with Ohtani. I mean, for a guy who's that good, you hope he returns to what it is. But I mean, he's doing it right. He had the problem. He had the surgery. He's going to rehab. He's going to take his time. There's no reason why he shouldn't at least get to 80-90% of what he was. Obviously, you have to be weary with somebody like that because guys don't go back to what they were after that. And of course, we've seen it with Bueller and Strasburg, people like that. Once you have one, I mean, you're going to have another one probably. It just keeps happening. Yeah, I think you have to be weary, but I don't think it changes a lot of things. In terms of the MVP, I really think there's only one guy that you can really argue, even as a chance. I like to do it without Ohtani. It's like a MVP list with Ohtani and then without Ohtani. But it's Corey Seager, man. We talked about it before. It's so fun to see him playing well again, being healthy towards the end of the year now. That man has been on a tear in the last, couple months now. At this point, we talked about it last week, but 334 average. Now he's qualified and everything. He's got a 1041 OPS, which was only 20 points behind Shohei Ohtani's. He actually had a 6.6 WAR when Ohtani only had a 6 hitting WAR, so he was leading in that sense. Only 7 less hits, man. He has 144 hits right now. Ohtani's got 151 and he's got 31 homers, so the power is really coming along, which is good for him. The biggest thing I like from Seager, man, is that 5 defensive runs saved in 100 games. You've seen it. I don't have to tell you. He was not a good defender earlier in his career. He was a tall, a tall white dude that was far from the ground. He had trouble. Everything he had to do was a backhand. But 5 defensive run saves is really good from a shortstop, especially. Corey Seager, man, I kind of looked back at it. He has a better season than Goldschmidt last year. He's rivaling Vlad and Harper in 21. Obviously, probably wouldn't beat Ohtani that year. You really have to go back to almost 2019 to find somebody that's had a better season than him, with like Bellinger and Trout. But yeah, man, Seager in a lot of years wins the MVP. But it's the Ohtani effect at this point.
Yeah, with the MVP, I mean, the fact that he can do both just puts him in a league in his own.
Right.
He ends the season with a WAR at, I think it was like 10.1. He had, like you mentioned, he had the 6 WAR from batting. He had around 3.5 from pitching. Until someone else can start doing both, or someone like Aaron Judge last year can create milestones with like home runs or something like that, no one's going to beat Ohtani. But it is good to see other guys like Seager, J-Rod, like those are probably going to be the top 3 in MVP voting. Any other year, Seager probably wins. But it's really interesting because Seager missed so much time and Ohtani's missed so much time that I feel like this is going to be the first year where like the MVP only played like 140, 100-ish games. Most of the time, like we're about to see like between Acuna and Betts, like those guys have played like almost every day. Acuna only missed, I think, his first couple games like last week because he got hurt. And he only missed like 2 or 3 on that. He was on pace to play 162.
And it was really just precaution at that point.
Yeah, because they don't want him to get hurt when they get closer to October. If they were in a bigger, tighter push like race, he probably would have played. It's the same thing with Betts. They gave him a day or 2 off, and then he had his baby was born in like I think early in the season, so he was out for like 4 days for that. So, but there is some. That's why it's just a little interesting. Just the fact that they have that much WAR and their stats are like that high, like the amount of hits, homers. Like Seager's like I think about set his career high in homers, and he's played like this is like the least amount of games he's played in like his full season where he's healthy, right. Not like the 2018 year where he had Tommy John. So that's just interesting right there. But 2024 AL MVP race though, that's all right. Open arms now because if Shohei stays in the American League, he's not pitching, or he may leave. So then you don't have to worry about him again. So that'll be interesting for next year. But far and away, Ohtani's going to win MVP. I don't want to sound like Ben Verlander creaming over him or anything, but he's just. I won't say he's like the best baseball player, but he's just the most unique. And if he does what he does year in and year out, he's more than likely going to win. In terms of the contract, everyone was flaming on Stephen A. Smith today, and they took his. I feel like people obviously everyone watched the part of the clip that you talked about, but they didn't play the rest of the clip where
Right.
he talked about more of it. Um, Obviously, he's wrong on that front. Where, I mean, I went to the Phillies game to see Ohtani. I was like, all right, cool. The Angels are in town. Let me go see Ohtani. So, I think it was someone posted it on ESPN's page under that video where it was like the Angels are like number 2 in terms of like away fan attendance next to the Yankees, who are probably the most known franchise in the world in
Yeah.
terms of baseball. And Ohtani is by far and away the most popular baseball player probably ever.
Yeah.
Getting close to Jeter-esque territory because Jeter was an icon in the United States and these Dominican countries that watch baseball. Ohtani is like an icon to like pretty much the whole planet from
Right.
the Western to the Eastern hemispheres. Like, everybody kind of knows his name. Um, when it comes to the contract, I've been debating it, and I'm kind of leaning to the part where I don't think if it's my money, no, I don't think I'm going to give him a contract. And but if it's my other, like it's just, these are the team's money, like they can do whatever they do. If they can justify giving him that much money, then by all means do it. And like we've talked about before, the amount of merchandise, the media attention, like all the money that you're going to get from Ohtani, it'll probably pay for the contract itself more than likely. But I've just seen too many big term deals or long term deals
Mhm.
kind of bite teams in the ass. And there's so many red flags around Ohtani right now where I would be very wary to give him a long term deal with over 500 million. But that's just my opinion. I feel like if I was the Dodgers, the way I would want them to go with this offseason, I would just it'd be cool to have Ohtani. I feel like everyone's been picking him to go there, but if it's me and my team, I think they should use that money elsewhere because use that 500 million to fix other holes on your teams. Because the Dodgers' biggest issue is pitching, and that's going to carry over to next year too. So if Ohtani can't pitch, you're losing half the player, and you're banking on him rehabbing well. So there's just too many red flags for me to be comfortable about it. But if he ends up signing with the Dodgers, I'll be like, okay, well, I guess we got Ohtani, let's ride. So, but that's just my 2 cents on it.
Right. I think that what you were basically saying is there's too much risk and not enough reward. Like, it would be super cool to have Ohtani on your favorite baseball team, but like having a guy that's not contributing as much with all these issues, because he could definitely come and be the best player in baseball for the next 4 years and 4 or 5 years and earn everything. But still, does that win you, 4 or 5 championships? No, you might win one. You maybe a couple if you're lucky. Baseball's not a sport where you can go and buy a $500 million player and win a championship like basketball is. I think while Otani's generational, I think what you said is right. It's like I would rather have that money spent somewhere else.
Yeah,
Um, I, I I would stay away from it if I was a Phillies too.
yeah. I mean, in terms of the Dodgers, a DH, that's essentially what Otani is going to be for the first year to 2 years. Like even when he does come back and pitch, that first year you're pitching, that's like your rehab year. Like you're starting to get back into the swing of things. So you're likely not seeing Ohtani at peak Ohtani until probably 2026, which I mean, he'll be over 30 and, that would be his second UCL type surgery. So a lot of red flags. Definitely going to be interesting, like we've been saying this past couple of weeks, to keep an eye on what happens. But it definitely seems like his time in Anaheim is probably over because there are reports that are just saying he would literally go anywhere as long as it gives him a chance to win compared to what has been previously reported. He really wants to stay on the West Coast. So
That's
um, definitely going to be interesting. We'll shoot it real fast. We didn't get to talk about it last week, but we'll talk about it briefly this week. We got about a week to 2 weeks left, less than. I know the Dodgers play like 12 games. Phillies probably play somewhere in that ballpark too. Biggest concern as we get ready to head into October.
we'll do one. We'll do one since it's real quick. Honestly, fatigue. A lot of people are going to say bullpen. A lot of people are going to say strikeouts, things like that, fundamentals. But I think fatigue is the biggest thing, man. We're seeing it with Nola, definitely. Nola's not this bad of a pitcher. He's been pitching really well as of late. I'm knock on wood, but hopefully we get another good September and October from Nola. But Wheeler, again, another guy who has been under 3 his whole career in Philly, ERA wise, and now he's at about mid 3, which is still super good for him, and we love him and we need him, but not as good as he was. Bryson Stott is a big one. You can see his bat's not getting through the zone as quick as it has been. Um, I think playing that long season last year, I mean, there hasn't been a game that the Phillies haven't been in or been playing on the same day in what, a year or 2 years now. So I think that's the biggest thing that scares me coming into the playoffs.
Yeah. Honestly, my biggest concern, and it seems like it's always the X factor in how far the Dodgers go, is Clayton Kershaw. I mean, it's really their rotation has been so snake bitten this year, between injuries or certain guys not panning out. Noah Syndergaard, we were banking on Bueller coming back. He gets shut down. They're going to let him get fully rested and come back next year. Kershaw, he's been battling some injuries with his shoulder and his back. The biggest thing about him is that his velocity just seems like it's gone. Like, I don't think we're ever going to see Kershaw come back to that, because once Father Time starts taking certain things away, it's not about regaining it. It's about adjusting and moving on. And I think this year and last year, we've definitely seen Kershaw mature, because, he was never a flamethrower, but now he's at the point where his fastball is in Rich Hill territory, where it's like 89 that he was maxing out last week. If he can get through the playoffs, giving me like 5-inning quality starts, we need that. And I mean, if Kershaw's not on, like, that puts a lot of pressure on the rookies that are in the rotation now. I talked about it before, where at the Dodgers page is they're kind of deciding, like, who do you start game 1? And I really think Kershaw gets the start, just because of he's been there the longest, then potentially if there's a game 5, he would have 6 days rest, so you could put him on that one. But say he loses that start, that puts way more pressure on Bobby Miller in game 2, who's a rookie, who I feel like he could be there for the moment, but you're asking a lot for a rookie pitcher who barely played in the minor leagues these last 2 years because of one of the COVID year, and then these last 2 years he had injuries of his own, to say, all right, kid, the whole city of Los Angeles is depending on you to get this game 2, or else we're going to go down 0-2 in the series. So if Kershaw goes, the Dodgers go. If Kershaw doesn't, I mean, maybe they squeeze by in the NLDS, but you need quality starts. You need at least 2 quality starts from Kershaw in the NLCS or the World Series. So the reason why 2020 was such a breeze for them is, I mean, Kershaw only had like 1 bad start in the playoffs that year. He was a guy that was clutch for them in the time they needed him. So if he's not going, it's going to look kind of scary for Dodger fans.
Yeah, I think you literally took the words out of my mouth. I think as Kershaw goes is as the Dodgers go. I think those 5 innings could be crucial, man. He still has stuff. If you get 5 innings and no run ball, 1 run ball in a playoff game, you'll take that every day of the week. I mean, we're rooting for him here. Everybody wants to see Kershaw do good, man. So, yeah, I love that you pointed that out, because it does seem like as Kershaw goes, the Dodgers go.
Yeah. But other than that, that'll do it for this week's episode. We'll be back the same time next week, and that'll pretty much be, I think, almost a week from the playoffs at that point. We should probably have a lot more stories about clinches, potential wild card matchups are starting to get finalized. I know if the Dodgers win today, I think, and the Brewers lose, I think the magic number for us to get that bye is 1. Phillies magic number is probably dropping to get that 1 seed for the wild cards. So hopefully we got some more news on that front, and then we can get some more structure for the October. But other than that, that's it. That's everything.
Peace.